Hello! So this is my first year ever trying to garden in my entire life, and I learned so much during this first growing season. From starting the seeds to actually keeping things alive up on my New Jersey rooftop to actually figuring out what it is I'm gonna do with all of my harvests. So now that it's basically winter, I wanted to just do like a little 2025 gardening season wrap up and also tell you how I'm gonna take everything I learned this year and apply it to next year's garden. So we're gonna chat about what worked, what didn't work. I'm gonna show you some of the seeds that I got for next year, as well as a really exciting new addition to my rooftop. And we're gonna chat here in my studio where it's nice and warm and not absolutely freezing like it is outside. But I'm gonna show you tons of pictures from the entire gardening season so we can still pretend like it's summer. So let's first talk about the things that worked. And I'm actually really proud to say that I didn't have any like major failures or disappointments this year. I thought for sure, since it was my first time growing things, that I would end up with like at least some dead plants, but overall I actually managed to keep everything alive even with the like really intense winds that we have here and this really intense heat wave that hit us in the middle of the summer. My first plant ever on my rooftop was a husky cherry tomato plant that I actually bought in 2024 when we first moved into this property. And for a while, that was like the literal only thing up on our roof, like before we even had furniture. I just like put it upstairs in its original pot and it just like immediately started suffering because the sun scorched all of its leaves, and then the really strong winds that we have here just like blew off all those scorched leaves and started snapping all of the branches. I even found the poor little guy like literally sideways rolling across my roof because the pot was so light that the wind just kind of carried it away. So with all that happening in front of me, I decided to put it in a much heavier pot so it wouldn't roll away. I gave the tomato a whole bunch of stakes just to support all of its branches, and then I pushed it up against the back wall just to give it a little bit of shade, and after doing all those things, it totally thrived. And so this year I decided to get the exact same kind of plant, but immediately did all of those like protective measures, the heavy pot, the stakes, and pushing it up against the wall, and it absolutely thrived. And that whole experience just told me a lot about how I need to proceed with my garden. I knew I needed plants that could handle like full blazing sun. I knew I needed really heavy containers. And I also knew that I needed to be really generous with like a lot of stakes and supports just to keep everything protected from the wind. So with all that in mind, my tomatoes this year ended up doing beautifully. I had 3 varieties. I had that cherry tomato, the husky cherry red from Home Depot. I had a purple Cherokee and also a Castellato Genovese, both of which I actually ended up getting for free at my local community garden because they had an excess and were just like handing them out at the farmer's market. And they were 3 happy little tomato plants that ended up giving me some really delicious and also really beautiful harvests. I also grew some purple jalapenos. I ended up with about 5 of those plants in total, I think, and they did so well, producing just like an absolute abundance of these gorgeous deep purple jalapenos. And then I ended up using those peppers to make a really delicious peach jalapeno jam, which was my whole reason for growing them in the first place. I actually have a whole video about that jam making process on my channel if you want to check that out. In general, both inside and outside of the garden, I really like to have long-term projects that I can like research and have fun exploring and like see through to the very end. So growing a really specific pepper variety with a really specific jam recipe in mind was just perfect for me. But on the other hand, I will say the tomatoes did bring me a lot of joy, but I'm not really sure if I'm gonna end up growing any next year. Yes, they are absolutely beautiful. They taught me so much about gardening and they ended up doing really well on my roof. But I've just kind of come to realize that I don't think I'm someone who's as like super enthusiastic and starry-eyed about a tomato as I am other things that I could be growing in the garden. Like for example, I was so excited about my strawberry plants this year. Oh my gosh. If you guys saw my videos where I was documenting the beginning of my gardening journey, you would have seen that that strawberry plant was originally just a little strawberry runner that I literally pinched off a plant in Home Depot, and it became this big beautiful plant that eventually started putting out its own runners, so now it's 3 really beautiful plants. And I've gotten the most beautiful bright red super sweet tasting strawberries from those plants that to me feel like an absolute treasure. I just love fruits in general, and for me getting like a bright, fresh, warmed from the sun strawberry up on my rooftop just felt like a luxury. And also these strawberry plants can supposedly survive over the winters here in New Jersey, so that's really exciting too because I can hopefully just keep it going for a couple more years to come. So I definitely want to get some more strawberry plants or just like keep propagating the one I have until I have a ton of strawberries. Speaking of fruits, I also ended up getting a raspberry bush on my roof, which originally started out as like 3 really sad looking tiny branches and eventually grew into this massive raspberry bush. And it made tons and tons of fruit. I pretty much ended up getting like a small handful basically every single week, which when you think about how expensive raspberries are at the grocery store is actually pretty amazing. So yeah, I'm gonna keep taking care of that. Hopefully it'll survive the winter and hopefully we'll have some more raspberries next year. I also did have a blueberry bush, but that wasn't nearly as successful. I would actually say maybe it wasn't successful at all. I was able to keep it alive and I did a ton of research to figure out like what a blueberry needs to thrive. So I gave it special fertilizers and soil acidifiers, but it just didn't end up making any fruits at all. Apparently that could be totally normal for a young plant, and sometimes blueberries need a couple years to get established before they actually start making fruit, so maybe I just need to be patient. I'm gonna keep going, I'm gonna keep taking care of it, and we'll see if time helps it out, because if it starts making blueberries, that might end up being my favorite plant of them all. So just because of the sheer amount of joy that I got from all my fruit plants this year, I was definitely thinking of adding some more next year, but I'm not exactly sure which ones yet. But if you have any other thoughts or if you've had any other berry successes, please let me know. All that being said, I did end up getting some seed packets for a couple things that are exceptions to my like, meh feeling about savory foods. One of which is the biquinho pepper. These are just like super cute tiny little peppers that offer just a little bit of heat, and their name means little beak because of their really unique little shape. One of my friends actually told me about these because she herself was growing them, and she ended up making a little jar of these teeny tiny little pickled peppers, and they were so good. I also just love the thought of having like a teeny little pepper plant just covered in teeny little pops of color, and then trying to make some of my own pickles next year in the future as like a long-term goal. Similar to jam, I've never made pickles before, so that might be just like a cool way to check something off my bucket list. So I'm gonna try to grow these tiny little whimsical peppers next year and hopefully make some tiny little whimsical pickles. Speaking of tiny, cute little pickly things, I also got some seeds for cucamelons. That same friend who showed me the biquinho peppers also showed me these, and these are also just like very delightful and joyful. These are also called mouse melons because they look like teeny tiny little watermelons, and they have a really nice cucumber crunch and a really nice mild flavor. They also make fantastic pickles, and if combined with these, I would just have the cutest little pickle jar ever. In general, I feel like this first gardening season has kind of helped me realize like what it is that I find joyful in the garden. And I think for me, the key is that if I'm gonna grow vegetables, they have to be as entertaining as they are tasty. I like whimsy, I like delightful little treats, and I also like things that can contribute to a larger goal in some way, whether that's like a cooking goal or some larger creative artistic goal. So with that in mind, I wanted to talk to you about some of my larger, more artistic plans. So this year I started some madder plants, and these guys take about 3 years to mature, but when they do, I'm gonna be able to harvest their roots and get some really beautiful red dye from them. And they've actually been doing really well on my rooftop. There's a whole bunch of leafy green growth, which hopefully means that the roots underneath are doing really well. So I just have to keep them alive for another 2 years and just keep being patient. And then there are my indigo plants, which actually also did really well on my roof. I ended up getting multiple harvests from them, and they just kept growing and growing back. I ended up harvesting them for some fresh leaf indigo dyeing, which is pretty much like taking the fresh leaves, blending them up, and then dipping my fabric into them. In this case, it was this cowl that I'm wearing right now. I actually ended up making a video about this whole cowl project. If you want to check it out, I'll put a link in this video's description. And I also ended up taking some indigo harvest so that I can make an indigo vat. That's like a much longer and more complicated process that involves fermenting the leaves and doing some like chemical reactions, and I'm still kind of in the middle of that process, so that'll hopefully be a video in the future. So between my two plants, my indigo and my madder, I have my blue and my red, and I feel like the next logical step is to try to make yellow. That way I have my primary colors covered, and my thought was that it could be a really fun project to try to create the whole color wheel, to have like a homegrown rainbow. So I got a few different seeds to help me achieve that goal. First, I got weld. Weld is a plant that's been used for literally thousands of years of human history to make a really rich and really long-lasting yellow dye. This plant actually takes 2 years to mature, which means it's gonna be done at the same time as my madder plant, so it kind of works out in a way. But for more immediate instant gratification, I also got a whole bunch of seeds for other yellow producing flowers. I got the Mardi Gras Coreopsis, I got the Dyer's Coreopsis mix, some Hawaiian marigolds, and Dyer's chamomile. My thought was that since the weld is going to take a really long time to grow and mature, I could just plant these in all the empty spaces of my garden, and that'll give me many different shades of yellows that I can play with, either as a dye vat where I can simmer the leaves gently and then dip pieces of fabric or yarn into them. Or I can try bundle dyeing, which is something I've really wanted to try for a long time now. So I think next year is gonna end up being my year of yellow, and I'm so looking forward to that. And I also want to grow these flowers just because I want to do a little bit more for the local pollinators. Most of what I grew this year ended up being green leafy things, and I literally saw like bees and butterflies come into my garden, kind of look around, and then leave, and that just like broke my heart. The literal only insects that actually seemed to thrive on my garden were the freaking spotted lanternflies. So I definitely want to include more flowers on my garden, not only for my dyeing and for my experiments, but also hopefully to attract some beneficial insects to my rooftop. And also just to bring some more like color and joy to this space in general. Okay, so I got my berries, I got my tiny little vegetables, I got my red, and I got my yellow. So let's now talk about fiber. This year I filled a raised bed with cotton seeds that I got from a cotton ball that was gifted to me from a friend. So I took this ball of locally grown New Jersey cotton, literally took the seeds out of it, and then planted in my own garden. And I got to watch the whole process of this little tiny seed turn into this absolutely massive plant, and then it produced these gorgeous flowers. The flowers would only last about a day or so, they would then fall off and start creating a cotton ball, and just watching that whole process felt like magic. And then to be able to harvest literal cotton fiber that I can then take down to my studio and process and spin and turn into something that I can actually like wear and enjoy forever is just incredible. Currently, my harvest from this year is actually still in fiber form. I'm waiting for the last of my cotton balls to open up for the season, and then eventually I'm gonna turn all of this into something, which of course is gonna be its own video in the future, so stay tuned for that. Anyway, cotton pretty much just ticks all of those boxes for me of being like joyful and whimsical, and it also just did so well on my rooftop. It absolutely thrived. So I'm definitely gonna grow some more of it next year, and I wanna try to grow like a lot of it just so I can have a lot of material to work with. But you might be asking yourself like, okay, where are you gonna put all that? You can't have like a cotton field up on your roof. Well, I got a really, really exciting new addition to my rooftop from the sponsor of today's video and the first ever sponsor of my channel, Vego Garden. So let's set up my new raised bed. You guys know I don't usually have sponsors for my channel, but I decided to partner with Vego Garden in particular because they have amazing gardening products that perfectly suit my rooftop gardening situation. They very generously sent me their 17-inch 9-in-1 raised bed kit. I got mine in the color sky blue, as well as the self-watering wicking floor for 17-inch classic novel beds, and I am so excited I could literally cry. This metal raised bed kit is so cool because it has a modular design that makes it so I can configure these 9 pieces in tons of different shapes. I went for the 3.5 by 6.5 foot layout because this perfectly fits against the wall of my rooftop. These beds are super easy to assemble, and they're made of this rust-proof metal that's food safe and designed to last for decades, which is perfect for me because I want this setup to stay put long term. Here you see me and Ryan setting it up together, and the process was super easy. I then set up the self-watering floor, which is gonna fit this bed perfectly and help me keep my plants nice and watered, which is really perfect for my hot climate where things dry out fast, especially for the thirsty plants like cotton. Another really great thing about this wicking floor is that it's gonna serve as a barrier between my rooftop deck and the soil inside of the garden bed, which will protect both my roof and the plants. And with this watering system inside the bed, I still have 12 inches of planting depth, which is more than enough for my planting needs. If you'd like to upgrade your garden space, click the link in my description and use my discount code AndreaAlexander10 off for $10 off your order. And if you visit their site between now and December 7th, it's Vego Garden's Black Friday and Cyber Monday sale, which is one of their biggest promotions of the year. Thank you so much to Vego Garden for not only sponsoring this video, but also for supporting my gardening dreams. Okay, back to the video. Okay, so if you're keeping tabs on this whole garden planning, you may have noticed that since my cotton is now moving from the wooden bed to its beautiful new home, I now have a whole bunch of space available in its previous home. So what am I gonna put in that spot? So I've been doing some brainstorming of what I could possibly grow there that checks all of my boxes, which include actually being able to survive up in my rooftop conditions, something that's whimsical and would bring me joy, and then also something that might contribute to like a larger creative goal or like an art project of some kind. And then I had an idea, and it was one of those ideas that like when it came to me, I just started tearing up because I was so excited. Gourds. But not just any gourds. I specifically want to grow the kind that you can like dry out and then carve into. The thought of growing my own gourds and then turning them into like actually useful things like bowls or cups or just like wild art projects just makes me so excited. Like literally what could be better? So I ended up going online and finding seeds for a couple different varieties of gourds. I got 2 types of water bottle gourds, one which is a miniature and one that's regular in size. And then I also got a wren house straight neck gourd. And I'm gonna come up with some kind of a trellis system and we're gonna see if I can make some gourds happen. And I just like can't wait. I'm so excited about this. And I'm also gonna grow some extra seeds to see if I can convince my parents to grow some in their backyard. So all these seeds and ideas that I've shared with you today are all the things that I'm like officially committed to that are definitely gonna happen, at least to the best of my ability. And I could not be more excited. And I also know that between now and the spring season, I'm definitely gonna like keep researching and keep having more ideas of what I could put up there. But I would also absolutely love your suggestions because I know that there are a bunch of you in my comment sections who are actually very accomplished and well-seasoned gardeners. So please definitely let me know in the comments. 1, what is your absolute favorite plant to grow? 2, do you have anything especially weird or whimsical that you've tried to grow in the past and how did it work for you? And then 3, do you have any suggestions for me for my funky rooftop situation of what might actually do well up there? Anyway, that's my whole 2025 garden story and my 2026 garden plans. Thank you so much for those of you who stuck around until the end of this video and are as invested in this garden success as I am. This little space that I have has brought me such an immense amount of joy this year and I'm so excited to just keep like growing things and learning and experimenting and researching. And hopefully I'm gonna do a much better job of documenting this next year now that I know that I can actually like do it. Thank you so much again for watching and another big thank you to Vego Garden. And I will hopefully see you in my next video.